Christian, you okay?
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Well, we're starting in about 2 minutes.
Okay.
Christian, nice to meet you.
Is anyone speaking not in Christian? Okay, everyone, can you grab your seats, please? Oh, I've done it again. Yeah, exactly. Okay, you've got 30 seconds to sit down. It's like musical chairs. While you're waiting, and for the streamers at home, you're missing out on this beautiful, I feel it needs a bit of promotion here. It's lovely. Be seen in Paris with this gorgeous drinking pot. It's life-changing. Okay, talking of life-changing, we're going to move on to our next panel. We heard in the last session a few of the ideas that I think are going to contribute to this session. a sense of place, a sense of community, and a sense that public support working with cinemas and cinemas working in collaboration with each other have the capacity to help us through these difficult times of recovery and into a period of renewal. How that partnership is going to work is going to be one of these themes coming in here, but a really strong sense I think we'll be hearing here is a feeling that cinema's contribution to European cultural diversity is not just in what it shows, it's in what it is. It's in the place that it occupies and its importance within the communities it serves. And a lot of what we've been hearing about earlier on will be followed on here, that sense that these are assets that belong to the people of the communities in which they're based. And I think we'll hear a fair bit about how this is going to happen. So I'm going to introduce you to our panel. We're going to start actually with a presentation from CRISTIAN, who I think will talk to you about cinema development in the French regions. Actually, if you do your presentation first, and then I'll introduce you to the rest of the panel so we can have discussion. So, CRISTIAN, over to you.
Thank you.
Bonjour à tous.
Good afternoon, everybody. And thank you to Europa Cinema for welcoming us here. Thank you, Claude-Eric, Fatima, the linchpin of this conference. Thank you, Michael. Europa is 30 years old and will soon be 40. We came a little bit before you. We're very proud to be here to celebrate this anniversary. As you know, in France, we have a state policy vis-à-vis the cinema, which is quite a major one. And in this state policy, we're part of it, in fact. We're a national agency because we intervene on a national level, but we're not a state entity. We're a structure that was created by the Ministry for Culture in 1983, so that together with CNC, we could cover the country. At the time of a preceding crisis, as Laurent said earlier on, we had a crisis in the 90s, which brought admissions down to 113 million, I think. So after a number of structural crises, we'll probably reach 150 or 160 admissions now. Million, of course. So the life is just an eternal recommencement. And we always have the same values. People have always talked about the cinema disappearing, but it's still here. And in the 90s, other audiovisual experiences appeared, private TV, Canal+, but we still have a large number of movie theaters in Europe. Creation in 1983. Sorry, the commentary here is in French, but the images are as important as the written word here. At the time, there was a drop in audiences. Major film distributors focused, of course, on the biggest cities, biggest urban centers, because of the immediate economic return. All the small and medium-sized cities were experiencing tough times. The movie theaters were not comfortable. Sound at the time was often not stereo. It was mono. It wasn't Dolby like you have today. The conditions for welcoming the public were fairly Spartan. Things were kind of old. Perhaps there was an aging also of the actual teams running the movie theaters. Also, the films came very late to the movie theaters. Currently, spectators tend not to be satisfied if the film comes 5 weeks after national release. At the time, it wasn't the 5th week, it was the 5th month or the 8th month, or 1 year after releases in Paris. So you had this twofold handicap, which really raised difficulties. The system set up by the state consisted in providing for financial support through the CNC in order to support the renovation of these movie theaters, whatever the status, that is, associations, private movie theaters, or theaters run by associations. And the idea was to network throughout the country. The first piece of work of the agency consisted in identifying, as you see on the map here, the departments and parts of the country where there were the most difficulties, where we needed to carry out priority action. And then together with the distributors, we had to ensure that films would reach the movie theaters faster. The first film that we worked on was a quintessentially French film, LANDAIS, with Jean-Paul Belmondo. We needed a real driving force in terms of film, so people would go back to the movie theater. So the aim was to renovate the movie theaters, get films screened in these movie theaters much faster so that the audiences would come back. That was 83. We are an association supported by the CNC. We thank the CNC, of course, for supporting us. It always has since our inception in 1983. And we have 1,400 members who are all players in the dissemination of the cinema in France, ranging from creation, film directors who are happy to see their films being shown throughout the country, and those in charge of distributing the films, all the players, in other words, the exhibitors, more than 1,800 exhibitors and 70 territorial entities. At the time of the crisis of the cinema in the 90s, we saw a number of local governments buying the movie theaters because they didn't want them to close, because movie theaters create a lot of dynamic activity in a city. Often, we're talking about movie theaters in a rural area, and when there's no movie theater, there's no activity anymore. It's a motor for economic activity, and it makes the city centers much more dynamic and active. Like in 83, the agency has 3 levels of action. It helps in the dissemination of films, so these films can get to the movie theaters on reasonable terms and so they're attractive to the public. Also, in terms of the project holders, the idea is to help them to build up their project. And also, we act when it comes to heritage films. It was difficult for people in these rural areas to get access to these heritage films and hence to the culture of the cinema. First action, we focused on content. Here you have the film Wiström, an art house film released in 2022. The black dots are the initial plans for national release. Memento was the distributor, 204 cinemas. Some movie theaters don't have access to national releases, or even they don't have access the second or third week to these films. So there are negotiations between our agency and the distributor to reach an agreement in order to broaden the initial plan for release. This agreement is necessary because it's the distributor who owns the dissemination plan. And in red, you have where our agency was really active. We ensured circulation within 3, 4, or 5 weeks so that these territories also would be able to see the film. So over and beyond the first week, there had to be some kind of continuity. This map shows the action taken how we managed to amplify access to films amongst all these movie studios, but we're not a distributor because the film is shown in only one movie theater, which then has to hand it on to another movie theater. So they have it for just a week each, but they get access to a film which they wouldn't otherwise have access to. For films with limited, we don't take action when you have a film which is designed to be released throughout the country. We're talking about limited release mainly. Second topic, access to heritage films. Here again, there was a kind of relegation because the inhabitants of big cities had quick access to these heritage films. There was a huge difference between the various parts of the country, and we've tried to offset that by supporting distributors who traditionally tend to focus on big cities. What we wanted to do was to ensure that these re-editions would be available throughout the country in small and medium-sized cities, and even in rural areas. And then we have a leading event, which was entrusted to us by the CNC, the Play It Again Festival. The idea is that we have an event based on heritage films. It's a national event, and this year 334 movie theaters participated in this event. We had Alex Luce, the actor and director, who was our sponsor. There were 20,000 spectators who came for this event. And then we have a third type of activity, which is perhaps the most innovative one that's not doesn't maybe exist elsewhere. The idea is to support project holders. Having a project is complicated, and if you can facilitate matters, streamline things, support project holders, whoever they may be, and things can be more simple. When you have a project, it's extremely complex, but if you divide the problem up into lots of smaller ones, you can simplify a lot. So our work consists in providing support for project holders when it comes to building up the project, either through the diagnosis of an existing movie theater that needs modernization. For example, ensure the accessibility to the disabled or people who are hard of hearing. Often you need to rethink the circulation of the public in the room, or we help with feasibility studies, how to add 1 or 2 additional screens. In France, 50% of movie theaters have a single screen. And given the policy of distributors, that's a major difficulty. They often need to create an additional screen. And then we have missions which entail assistance, mainly for local entities, local government, which help support this project, particularly in small cities. We give them support for 1 or 2 years. We're partners of the national program called Small Cities of the Future. We help the local government in these small cities to manage the city center, lend new life to it, and often movie theaters are a source of new activity. This is a picture from a big city, Paris. It shows you the relationship between the creation of a movie theater and the urban dimension. This is the city of Paris, which wanted to rebalance cultural activities in the eastern part of Paris. And on this around the canal, it decided to create a cinema. On the riverbanks, there was a lot of drug trafficking. In the addition of a movie theater adds light, cultural activities, with a view to pushing away these illicit activities taking place along the riverbank, the canal banks. Here's some other projects. I was saying that creating a movie theater is a way of creating cultural equipment, a place where activities take place, because movie theaters are also places for public education, creating, bringing in new spectators, welcoming different activities, social and cultural activities, over and above the actual screening of films. This is what happens in these movie houses, movie theaters. Here you have the CRISTIAN movie theater in a city which is a prefecture in the center of France, in the Cantal. It's a big city but it's a mainly administrative one. So for the locally elected representatives and the mayor in the city, it was very important to have a movie theatre. There's a combination between a private exhibitor who financed the interior of the building and the city financed the outer part with this very special, striking appearance. Architecture conveys a very strong image vis-à-vis the public. I often say to people at the French cinema school, the FEMIS, that architecture is like a suit. It's not enough to make us stand out, but it's a sign you convey to other people. So the facade is important. It's important to have this area where you welcome people. That's where people go from the outside to the actual cinema, to the movie theater. You need a nice lobby. And this is very important for art house movie theaters. And this is a very small movie theater here in Picardy. It's interesting because the three projects you see here, they got support from the EU in order to move on to digital equipment. They were setting up programming. They were reorganizing things in the city center, in the old city center of Amiens. And the idea was also to do things in the outskirts with these movie theaters close to these neighborhoods in the outskirts. And this movie theater was completely renovated, restructured. There are new lobbies, and the audience was multiplied by 4 compared with before and after. Of course, with the pandemic, audiences dropped, but restructuring and a renovation of the lobby proves to be essential when it comes to building up audiences and ensuring the success of a movie theater. So to conclude, we believe in the future. We believe in the future. Well, do we have any choice? If we want to disseminate the cinema, you need to have faith in the future. If we can't convince spectators, it will be problematical. We believe that all those who continue to renovate and restructure and modify the way in which they show films in a given territory, that these people will always manage to develop their project. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Christian. That's a perfect kind of intro into what we're discussing here. I think seeing the importance of cinema in small places and just how central they are to the cultural life of places, its importance in regeneration. That's a wonderful opening, I think, to what we're talking about here. You had me at Belmondo, though, to be honest. It was once you say Belmondo, I just know nothing can go wrong. So thanks for that. Let me introduce you to the rest of the panel. So we have METKA, and I'm going to say your surname, DARIS. Yes. Oh. But you'll probably all know METKA, a member of the board here, but actually a director at Kinodvor in Slovenia, and a big part, I think, of the Slovenian art cinema scene as well. And I think, for me, has been a really important kind of voice in a lot of the things that are being developed around new projects in Europa cinemas. Next, we have CRISTIAN HORDILA from Transilvanian Film Festival, and I'm going to tell you now that he will have to sneak off at exactly 5:30. There's only one flight a year to Transylvania, I understand. If he misses this one, it's all finished. But someone who has also been on the board of the EFP and is again, I think we'll hear about how something that started off as a festival and takes on a different life, and is also a really critical proponent of of lobbying, how you make politicians understand what is needed and what the value is. And that brings us to someone who I kind of hesitate to call a politician in a way. I don't know whether you like that description, but VERONICA KAUP-HASLER, the city of Vienna, I think someone who's a real rarity, I think, for a lot of us, which is someone with some input into cultural policy who actually understands and comes from culture. That's quite a shock. We just give that out to anyone's job in the UK. That's just someone off the street. So I don't know what happens in other countries. But anyway, let's start with you, Veronica. You do, I think, immediately, first of all, just give us a sense of what you do and also why youth culture is important in the kind of work that you do.
Yeah, thank you very much for inviting me. Actually, I'm really coming from the arts. I have run several festivals in Germany, in Switzerland, in Syria. So my background is culture, and I was appointed 4 years ago. And since my knowledge about the importance of art in times of crisis, but generally for society, is so ardent. I know this is so important. I invest in different sectors of the arts because we need it more than ever. And COVID showed us the weaknesses in so many ways in different places of society, but especially we survived by watching films, we survived by reading books, we survived by listening to music. And what did I do briefly for the film sector? I could increase a lot the money for production. So this is a huge step in the Austrian film history, I would say, but also in distribution and also in art house cinemas. So because I'm sure in this kind of development we see now the whole media landscape, we have to reconsider what is a cinema. We have to step out of the economic pressure they are all in, so the ticket incomes, everything connected to that. This is not, I think it's not going to last so long. So I regard cinema as like a museum, I would say, a living museum. And so we have to put money into art house cinemas that they keep up. And so they, art house cinemas in Vienna, they got money just for being there and doing their work, because they also have new tasks to reach out to new audiences. They have to, and they have to make this place a place, and I think that this wonderful lecture before put us to the point. It is a unique place. It's analog. We can feel bodies in a room. We smell them. We can share our thoughts afterwards, and this makes it so unique towards all other items we have in hand now. And this is how we try to push this uniqueness of sensation, being together in one room, and that's generally the basis of my politics, putting money to all sides of production of film.
No, I mean, I think from the exhibition end, the idea of a living space, a space that actually belongs to its community and is active within that community, is really important. But you seem to be saying, just so I'm clear, that art, that cultural film actually matters in that environment too, that actually we heard earlier on, or heard from CRISTIAN in the last session, she's talking about values, but the idea that that's politically understood as being something important in communities, I think is music, I think, to a lot of people's ears.
Yeah, I think this is absolutely a survival kit for all the challenges we have right now. And we see that this Facebook gesture, this like, not like, this really entered the talks in the TV channels, in media, at least in Austria, very much. And we need to work on machines creating empathy for each other, differentiation, other looks to other countries, looking beyond the borders, seeing the world from different angles. And I think it's a tool of resistance, and we need that ardently and urgently for our society.
Yeah, it didn't come up in the last session, but actually there's been a lot of talk from people here. We're talking about the loss of a kind of superstructure, critics. You know, when critics had lots of space to be to evaluate films and make those films part of everyone's everyday life, it's kind of turned into these days a thumbs up, thumbs down, 2-star, 5-star kind of culture. And what you're suggesting, I think, which is very interesting, is that we need to broaden that out. We need to have that discussion within those communities. We need to understand value in the broader sense. That's really appreciated, but it's how, really.
Yeah, and I think, for instance, I try to give all fields of art more money, and I say, don't work, but make less productions, better quality. And I have to tell my clerks and my administration, and also the court, which is viewing my reports, that we have to step out a form of evaluation which we used in the past, which is not longer working. So we need soft values, speaking of who is the audience, gaining your audience, a quality which you can't quantify, and this has to be in our evaluations as a new tool. But this is really hard work to develop this, and sometimes you get beaten by the opposition, but that's my role. I'm fine with that, because I know we can't solve the future questions with answers of the past. And we see all the communities who sold out their water or other commons, they have to rebuy it with high prices, and COVID showed us that we need a strong politics of the commons.
Yeah. I think the notion of evaluation that's not just a point system that you can just disappear off the edge is something bigger than that. I just wonder really quick, you know, I think a lot of people would love to have that kind of discussion, but I don't hear this very often from people who are in the positions that you're in. It seems to be quite hard work to get that message across. But in terms of your own political position, are you way out ahead of everyone else here and trying to bring them along, or is there a consensus around this now?
Well, I'm coming of the so-called Red Vienna, so there's a long tradition of social democrats, so I'm building on a wonderful tradition, but I'm still also an avant-gardist in that sense, and putting the mayor to the core of social democrat thinking and saying, if this is the basis where we stand, then we have to develop these thoughts for the future, and I think there needs to be a great thinking of the commons, of social being together in times where we are all torn apart.
Yeah, and I think it follows on from Christian's thing earlier on. It is that idea that culture can drive community, and I think that's a really interesting political angle. Let me just switch over to Christian if we can, because you're in...
He has to fly.
He does have to fly, and it's also, I mean, your experience maybe is a bit different in terms of lobbying for that kind of same acceptance, but maybe it's always worth reminding people of just the situation that there's been in Romania, which has been pretty much as tough as it's got in terms of the last 30 years.
Yes, thank you for having me. Sorry to be in a rush, but Lufthansa doesn't wait for me yet. So Romania, in the beginning of 90s, after communism age, had almost 400 venues or screens, And 20 years later, in 2010, we realized that we have left around 27. Rest of them were real interest of real estate for a lot of mayors to transform them, I don't know, in bingo halls, hotels, disco clubs, and so on. So during that time, we already had our TIFF, the Transylvania International Film Festival, and we realized that we have to use our involvement, our political connections, our funds, and so on to succeed to reopen some of the venues or to keep them. So at the beginning, we started to convince the Cluj City Hall to give us one of the venues called Cinema Victoria, because we realized that talking about films and culture or education is not really the hot point that is in their focus, but when we are talking with them about financing and money and costs, and we told them that if they will give us the venue for management, we will be able to pay for the employers, we will be able to renovate it, and so on, and we made a contract about it. So we are today still managing this venue. They don't pay for anything at all. And I think from the beginning we didn't put any money from our pocket, but it was a very long process of renovation with small steps and a lot of bad days sometimes. And in the end, it became a very successful story for a lot of, mainly for the Cluj City Hall, and then we started to promote it. And because we had this festival, and it's a great festival with a lot of fans, and everybody in Transylvania is loving it, we started to realize that we can export this model, and we started first of all, to have this film caravan across the country, but mainly in Transylvania. And we started to develop connections with the city halls from the small cities in the regions. And then we ended up proposing them to have small festivals like weekend events. And we had these two main objectives to build more and more our audience, but the second one, the secret one, was to get friends with the local authorities and make them understand that maybe it's better to reopen their venues or to invest in them or to look for opportunities how to invest in them. And I think we managed to have very good results in the end, because I don't know, guys from Târgu Mureș, they opened their Cinema Arta, and they kept it open, I think, until last year when they had to close it because of the COVID. But now we are talking with them and try to duplicate the model from Cluj and take over that cinema and reopen it. The guys from Oradea, who in the past had a huge venue, about I think 800 seats, they now are working with the Ministry of Culture to get a big project of financing and reopen the venue. So everybody, in small steps and in a long time, they started to understand the necessity of having in their community, in the small cities, to reopen the venues, even though they had a multiplex. But because of all these small film events like the caravans and the small brothers of TIFF, let's say satellites, they saw what is the nice engagement of the community when they have film events, when they have the film crew invited, when we had all those Q&As and so on. So this is a model that we were been working it in the last 10 years and developing. And also, what I realized that during all these years, we never put tough pressure on them. We all the time we wanted to be soft pressure guys with a lot of good intentions and small steps, because I think sometimes they're getting scared of big investigation, big commitments, and so on. And during the festival in Cluj, we all the time we are having or organizing a small workshop. We invite people from all the city halls to see models, to understand how can they do it, what they will win in the end. And even though the process is very, very long, we got this commitment, and the results are starting to
yeah. So let me just go back to that, because it's a really interesting approach you've taken, which is you've got to convince people that actually the period of the old Romanian film industry that died in the 1990s, that doesn't come back. What you're trying to do is you're starting afresh. You're trying to convince them that it's about regeneration, it's about skills, it's about people, it's about. But presumably you have to, with the administrations changing all the time, and we'll ask Veronica this as well as we go through, you've got to keep doing it. And I just wonder what the winning argument is, whether it's a right wing or a left wing or a centrist. If you've got to make the same argument over and over again, what is the one argument that says you should invest in cinema?
I think it's the legacy. In most of the city halls, you can find all the time not the political guys, but the administrative guys who will be there, even though the party will be red, blue, or yellow. And this is one thing. And if they understand that we are not going there with big requests and big pressure, so we want to build all the time very organic the relations and our projects also. And after 2-3 years, they gain a lot of trust in us, and we have relations developed in the last 10 years very strongly with all these small cities. They begin understanding the legacy of the city, the need of having a cinema open, what is representing for the community, and we are during the year, all the time when we are having a big premiere or we obtain a big movie, we make sure that we will send it there, even if it's for a special screening, so they feel that they are part of something big and we are looking for them. So I think this is the main argument.
Yeah, so for them, you're giving them the opportunity to say, here's something I did, here's something which you're giving to people, and it's something that shows over the long term, which I kind of understand, but
somehow yes, but I have to make this quote that we never took sides. So we prefer to do it very painful and slow with small steps, but we don't want to have any friends of any color, because in the end, film and culture and so on, it's no color here. So we avoid all the time to be promoting a politician or having too much friendship with them.
Yeah, and on the other side, I think the really important point to make is that you're also changing as a business. You know, it's not just saying, it's not just going to them with the same thing. You are having to change all of the time. You've got to keep getting better at what it is that you do in order to convince, to keep making the same argument. It has to be very flexible and fluid. You have to adapt. And when you speak to each of them, you have to be able to show results. And that seems like a lot of work.
I think, yeah, we are doing this, and for sure it's a lot of work, but I think we are very lucky that we have a team very passionate about it. sometimes they are very frustrated about this a lot of work issue, but yes, to gain their trust and to be able to put some roots in every project and in every city hall or relation that you have, we need to go in every place with tailor-made proposals, so we are not quite duplicate the model everywhere. We start from a plan A, but in the end we have to tailor-made it what they need, how can we do it, and in the end, if you take every example separately, you will see that are quite some differences. And yeah, we have to do this, or at least in Transylvania we have to do it, because we are there for 21 years, so we feel that if we don't accept this job for the community and for our audience, we will risk not having any venue in the end in the next years.
Yeah, no, I really get that. So it's not a negative message you're going with about we're in trouble, give us money. It's we can make a big difference, and that's where the partnership is based. Okay, I really get that. You're going to need to run for your flight.
Oh, yeah.
No, I will stay 10 more minutes.
Ah, excellent. Really, that's good news. So let me just bring back Veronica just for a moment on that discussion, because the point was being made there is the frustration, I think, is where you get one party in, they agree. I mean, how do you make yours permanent? How do you make some of those ideas and those evaluations and those approaches something which lasts, rather than something which one administration comes in and the next administration throws out? Is it possible to do that?
Well, on the first hand, I think the administration is more stable, normally. I don't know how long I last in this job. Today I still have it, so I'm happy. But I think the echo from the scene is important, and also, for instance, the fact that you step out of certain normal attitudes, like the Gartenbau Kino was for 40 years discussed to be renovated. The biggest cinema in Vienna, a wonderful 60 years from the 60s. And normally politics runs like this. The city says, okay, we only give money if the other side, the federal government, gives also the money, so you have, and nothing happens. And I just went out and said, I do it. I do it, and then they were under pressure to follow me. So sometimes you have to get out of an old habit and freshly start a new process. And now this, we gathered 3 million euros and we could renovate it. And now it's wonderfully there. Also small cinemas. So jump over old habits or old answers and try to work on the issue. And of course, this is renovated now, so for the next 30 years, I don't have to do anything in that sense. Yes, but with other ideas where we really try to establish this kind of juries, this kind of money, this is something we try to make permanently. But of course, we don't know how the future will be. Anyway, still in these times of crisis, I insist that the budget for arts is increasing. And we see it really, France was always a big role model, the times of Jacques Lang and of François Mitterrand, what kind of architecture, what kind of centers were built at the time. And this is an understanding which is has to be established in Austria, but I think I have a good team and good co-workers, but it's a struggle.
METKA, let me bring you in, because again, it's you know, the very positive reading of both of your discussions is that there is a winning argument that actually the things we've all been saying, that we're vital to the community, and that actually it's much more than just the films that are being shown. These are assets that need to be supported. That's wonderful, but do you you know, from your position, particularly as a smaller country, is that something which you recognize as a winning position that's easy to exploit?
Yeah, for smaller countries, of course, it means that if you want to have additional content to the just regular cinema program that, Veronica, you were talking about, education, values of the culture, building the visual literacy and all these, very big issues that all the cinemas are doing besides showing films. In a smaller country, that means that it has to be publicly funded. Somebody has to pay for cinemas to be able to do these things. And in the smaller cities or towns or even villages, the only accessibility to this type of content is if somebody pays cinema to provide it for the community. So this is the biggest issue in the smaller countries. And the system is really fragile. You have a different mayor in every municipality. We have 220 municipalities in Slovenia, which is 2.1 million populations, which is like one person, one municipality, basically. So you can imagine how many mayors that is. And, in our Slovenian Art Cinema Association, it's 28 members. It's very small, but it represents almost 30% of the cinema admissions in the country, which is a really big share. And also, we have to have, each member has to have a certain percentage of art house or international films that are showing beside national ones, which means that these cinemas are centers of films that are not shown otherwise if those cinemas don't exist. But the system is really, really very fragile, because if mayor thinks that we have a cultural center, because most of the members, they're not just cinemas, they have to have theater performances, they have, some of them are in libraries, they're part of a museum, or they have other activities as well, which means if there is not public funding, then they will show commercial films, or they will have more other productions, like music productions and stuff like that, music performances and stuff. So, yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's very clear. The fragility that you're talking about seems to me, it's in Europe, most countries are small countries by that definition, and I think that sense that at the moment there is no way other than public support for those things to survive, and right now in a period of crisis where there's lots of other places that spending could go, that's a pretty scary and difficult time to be in, and I just wonder, is it something where you feel the public funds and the public sector is with you at the moment, or do you feel there's that pressure?
It's very different. It's because if it's municipality money, it's different from municipality to municipality. Unfortunately, there is not a lot of state money for it. So subsidies from there is not a lot of national subsidies, for instance, for film education programs. There are always projects, like 5-year projects. It's never, we didn't manage to get it to become a program, which means sustainable, long-term, yearly.
Yeah, I mean that's the point. I mean, because I know, Christian, this will be your chance before you fly, and then we'll bring METKA back in. But the point of public funding during the pandemic, and in some senses it's needed right now, it's crisis money. It's the things falling apart. If we don't get some money, then it's going to be gone. That's different from the support that you're looking for, which is that long-term sense of we want support and work with you because we provide a value, a community value, which is completely different. It isn't just about survival, it's about the next stage on.
Yeah, for sure. So for cinema business, it's a long-term commitment, and it's not a business hit and run kind. So you have to have big plans on a long term. You have to have endurance. And in Romania, at least, we are in the sad scenario that we don't have an agency of regional development of cinema and things like this. The central administration is focused more on, I don't know, highways, hospitals, schools, and so on. So the main partner, the closest one, it's a local public administration, like a city hall. And mainly they own the buildings, even they are closed or they are now doing whatever they do. But the first step is to make them understand that they have to reopen the cinema, and then to understand that they have to invest some money, local money, maybe European monies, and so on, to rebirth the cinema venue in that place. And we help them till that point, and we help them after that, because they need programming, they need to understand this business. We as an organization, we don't want to interfere in any business. If they have a local actor who wants to manage the situation, this is wonderful. We cannot be in many places in one time, and we offer them a lot of workshop connections. We try to teach them regarding the programming, and in some cases, as I said, they understand. But it's more like a local fight for local money in the first place. Very few national budgets, and then it's about European fundings, where you can find places to develop any partnership and funding.
Yeah, it is that acting local, thinking global. Veronica, you wanted to make a point.
Yeah, I just wanted to add something, because I often feel that we are talking about art and film and cinema in a very defensive way. And I think it is time to make other, and ciao, have a good flight. No, and I think it's really time to make very clear and to state it very clearly that art is not a problem but a solution, and that therefore we need summer festivals. We have cinema festivals in the summer; they are for free. We need more spaces for free, museums, etc., because we see clearly all our surveys show that people have less and less money, and it is harder for them to enter an opera. It is harder and harder to enter, to participate. And this kind of exclusion is very problematic, because it creates tension in the society. And we have to come together as a society in order not to be alone and left alone in our homes. And I think if we make that clear, that society is more peaceful through sharing events, the social rooms we're creating by art and cinema, this is imperative for a healthy democratic evolution. And this is what I'm talking every day about, and I'm getting on the nerves of my financial senator in charge, so he helps me.
It does sometimes feel like we threw away the cultural cohesion argument, that actually it's about bringing societies and communities together, and that seems to be a harder point to make when in a world where it seems like the survival, if you take the UK, the big survival seems to be charge lots of money and go with the exclusion. You know, you can go places and watch the films you want to watch in beautiful settings, but the notion of the culture, the community coming together is something that perhaps we shouldn't lose. Let me just bring, as Christian wanted to make a point, and then I'm going to bring METKA back, if I may.
Well, we can always, of course, stress the cultural contribution for the local population, but often it's not that topic that's going to get people to move, to evolve. and accept the request for a new movie theater. As to the people we were in contact with, they want to make their commune or their territory more attractive. They want to attract companies, for example. And in companies, you have executives, you have directors, and what are they going to look at when they have several possible choices for setting up their company? They're going to look at what's available in terms of education, sports, and culture as well, and the cinema, because that's the leading cultural activity. So if you can get these people to understand that over and above the cultural interest, there's actually an economic payback, and that's something they're sensitive to, the economic argument. There you can really win, because we also have to cope with elected people who have financial issues, and these people come back to us and they say, well, maybe we'll delay the project because I have to find €1 million because of increasing energy costs. I have to heat my school, I have to heat the daycare center, so maybe we'll delay your project. So you have to come out with this argument. Developing culture is important, but you don't necessarily need to use cultural arguments.
Yeah, I mean, again, it's a great argument, but METKA not being in Red Vienna or France, which apparently is a cinema country, so it's still less fragile. From your point of view, Kinodvor has come from, it's been built up with bare hands. It's a living cinema. It's been tough to get there, but now it's a struggle all of the time, isn't it? I just wonder, what are the elements that you think can get that kind of long-term sustainability in place?
Well, first of all, it wasn't. We didn't build it with bare hands.
I thought you did it with your bare hands.
No. Unfortunately, no. I cannot claim that. But the cinema is going to be 100 years old, so we just, put some new blood into it. We were in Transilvania, so I think it's good to mention blood. It was a project of municipality who owns the building. And 15 years ago, it founded a public institution, Kinodvor, and the deal was that they will pay 50%, and 50% has to be, we have to provide the rest. It worked perfectly because we had a mayor who has in his finance plans 11% for the culture and arts, which is, I'm told, the largest percentage next to Vienna's for the culture and arts. But this is a very fragile system because in a situation that we are facing now, we may not generate 50% because the costs are going up, the costs of work is going up. The value of prices that we are having are lower. In effect, we keep less, which means that this system of 50% will not be sustainable. So this is, but we are doing very well in regards of visitors. We are very lucky to have trust of our audiences that are always there. We have 1/3 of our visitors are young audiences, but it took 15 years to get there. We have a support of schools, but not just Kinodvor, all the other members from the associations. Schools came back for school shows after because everybody was working so hard with them to not, it's very hard for a local cinema and schools that are like some kilometers away to get them to, to get buses, to pay. Parents have to pay for buses to transport them to cinemas. It's much easier to show them films in school via online, to get them to come back. And a lot of our members report that they have more school visits now than before, which is an amazing achievement. But it's a lot of work. So I think everybody who's working in cinema has to be a little mad and enthusiastic and very forceful, and it couldn't be done if people wouldn't see a sense of coming to a place where they think it's their place, basically. This is the main...
Yeah, you've got a really important point there. I mean, I put it in an ugly way before, and they put it in another ugly way. It's a blood, sweat and tears thing. You know, you've got to keep going all of the time on this thing, and the value of that public funding decreases at a time when your energy costs are going up, and your and salaries, presumably other things too.
And the big dilemma is, of course, the money that remains pile is getting smaller, but you want to give your audiences everything that you were giving them before. So how long can you go before you are actually, you know, the last fumes are going out and you will run out of the petrol? You know, so when do you make cuts, and if when? Or should you just say, no, we cannot go below this point?
Yeah.
What is the best strategy? So I think it's going to be interesting year in our centenary. But, you know...
Interesting year. That's a very nice way of putting it.
Yeah, but, you know, people who are working in cinema are always very selfish, you know, because we want to see the films in the cinema. So if you want cinemas to be operating, you have to do a lot of work for them to remain. So you really have to take care of the next generations of viewers, and then you're set. You have to get them young, you know how it works. And then they keep coming back until they are grown up. Now we have the full generation of 15 years olds that started, or a little more, then started going, that visited Kinodvor for the first time as a little 3 years old or 2 years old. So.
Yeah, you've played the long game, that's true. You started them when they're very young with those education projects, and then hope. Let me just see if there's any questions from the audience, or if people have points to make about their own situation as well. I can't see, I can see a hand at the back there. If you can just say your name and where you're from, that would be great.
Yes.
Yep. Oh, it's on. Thank you very much. I'm Mark Cosgrove from Watershed in Bristol in the UK. I feel somewhat of an interloper now, but I just want to say thanks very much for... It feels like I'm back home in the family of European cinema. Thank you. I might just start crying now, but I just want to raise a couple. Well, I want to raise one point and then also say something else about getting audiences in. So the point is that you talk about film and our venues and culture and cultural cohesion. I just wonder, I'm finding actually cultural clash and cancel culture and identity politics are making for a very fragmented sense of culture. And I just wonder if that's something that people on the panel of, and Christina, I guess, Veronica in particular has had to deal with. The other thing, in very practical terms, we are thinking, how do we get audiences from a broader social demographic back into the cinema in Watershed? And one of the things that I thought about is to do it would be to set up our own bus service, and that we could actually get a Watershed bus that would go around wider communities to get them in. I've no idea if it's practical, but it seems to me that it's a kind of active solution to going out, reaching out to audiences in order to bring them back in.
Okay, a couple of points there. I think the first one about the idea of the community base is, Veronica, it was pointed at you, but I think others may have views, which is you say that this is bringing the community together. That's great, but actually, in lots of ways, that kind of sense of cancel culture, which we hear about, is that an issue for you, or is that something that matters?
Yeah, I actually have to deal with a very specific monument in the city. A mayor in bronze from the edge of the 19th century. He died before Hitler was in power, but he died 1910 10, but he was the founder of the political anti-Semitism, and he's still standing there. And there were many discussions to remove him totally, and I made a town hall meeting with all different voices from cancel culture to preservation, and I gathered them in COVID times, and there were 50 people, and everyone had 5 minutes to make his point or her point, and I went for an artistic solution, and now we're making a call that art is making a difference, and that it is not removed from our thoughts or from our vision, because about the nothingness you can't speak, and I still want other generations to vomit or to be nerved by this person that this ever happened in this town. I don't want it to be removed, but so I try to find now a very complicated thing, a solution or a proposal by art, and this is highly, highly, highly discussed, and the aggressions of the ones who are saying we have to remove it immediately from our side, and we want to clean our city from all signs and traces of fascism, which is really a hard work, I would say, because there are so many. So I rather think we should continuously talk about what was happening in previous times, and how could we fight now against populism? How can we fight the populism which is actually happening since so many decades in Vienna, and you know Kurz, you know Strache, you might know some exponents of our great nation, and this is the catastrophe which came from the past and is still there.
But I think the point, that from the liberal left side of things, that's certainly true. It would have been useful to have had Christian here. He was talking about not being seen to belong in any particular political strata, but I think the point that could have been made is there is a sense that art and culture is something increasing amongst populists belongs to the left, and somehow the right is in a different kind of way. And that's Christian was, I think, saying it's very difficult to, if you go down that road, you've got to give a sense that culture belongs to everyone, wherever they are.
Yeah, absolutely. And this, you have to do things, of course. We have this kind of cult festival in the summer with 25 stages, and the board is totally mixed. So 50% are Austrians, so-called, but Austrians are already a mix, but anyway, and the others are Austrians with a migrant background. And so you have to put them into positions where they can decide, where they can really also bring new people in, new communities. So there are many programs, and it would be too long now to tell you how much we have to focus also on that, to include them in the whole process of society making.
Yeah, I mean, METKA, maybe you can just make a small point, because I think it's the argument being made is that cinema can bring people together, and I think what Mark was pointing out really is it seems like we're in a society where things are dividing more and more, identity politics, our history, there's lots of things dividing, and I just wonder if cinema can be a place in those circumstances that feels like it belongs to everyone, that isn't divisive, that actually does, in a sense, bring people together.
Are you asking me?
Yeah.
Well, I think it's definitely yes, because you don't have to say at the door, what your beliefs are. Are you in a party, and if so, in which party? Everybody is welcomed. You can enjoy the film. You can talk about it. We don't have any cancel culture problems yet. I have to knock someplace. We have very passionate talks about the films. We have, discussions about the content of the film, and then, but it's always with respect. We make sure that let's say the hall itself is welcoming. The people feel safe. Everyone that comes feels safe. We make sure that they can come as often as they can. Don't forget that cinema, film art is one of the most accessible forms of art. As our head of program often says, it's the only contemporary art that you can see immediately the top-notch, the best quality films in a country that otherwise, for instance, wouldn't be able to show the latest big exhibition of famous painter or sculptress or something like that.
No, it's true. And I think from Christian, when I'm looking at all of those cinemas in those small towns, you're bringing world-class culture into a small town, and that must make it
for a very accessible price.
Very good price.
Yes.
And maybe in a bus. Did anyone else have one at the front here? Oh, we've got one at... Who's next? Yeah.
Salve, buonasera. Modernissimo, Napoli, Italia. Innanzitutto è bellissimo poterci ritrovare di nuovo tutti insieme qua, è veramente...
This is a question I'm asking, and I'm from Naples in Italy. It's a great joy to be here today. So, during pandemics, I was absolutely certain that once we would open up our cinemas, the whole crowd would rush inside, because we couldn't stand any longer staying home. And we thought that we were going to have some type of mission to psychologically re-educate the people, re-educate to be together. Unfortunately, at least in Italy, but statistics show that it's also elsewhere, things have not happened this way. And young people, for instance, immediately went to concerts. And once we had sales of tickets for Coldplay in Naples next June, there will be a concert, and in 10 minutes we sold every ticket for the stadium, the Maradona Stadium of Naples. And they added another day, and the next day the whole ticket, every ticket was sold out. And other young people went to discotheques, or they went to various places where they could meet together, except in cinemas. Personally, we've had a lot of success due to a tradition which is about 30 years old in our cinema, which name is Modernissimo. We have succeeded in bringing back to cinema people over 50, but young people did not show up. Modernissimo is a cinema in the city center of Naples, and we have succeeded in bringing back our own viewers. But we're still fighting against multiplexes with 13 screens outside the city, and you know that the youth especially goes to multiplexes. So it's very easy to bring people of over 50 back to cinemas, and they want to see films in a theater. However, young people have different habits. They may have gotten used to streaming during the pandemics. They live differently from us, and it's hard for them to come back to cinemas. So, to bring young people in theaters, we need a different architecture of our theaters, for instance, and our screens, our hall rooms. It's not a matter of money only. We heard someone say that prices could be dropped lowered in Italy, but it's not a matter of price, because concerts may be sold at 50 euros per ticket. Then the young people, they go to a restaurant and they spend more money, and everyone goes. So it's a matter of culture and not of price. A film is a masterpiece of culture, and especially authors' films that are not really attractive at first sight, but do these authors' films still count for the youth?
In the UK, 2 out of 5 of all nightclubs have closed, and 2 out of 7 of all Indian restaurants have closed. So I think a lot of the assumptions we make about where people are going should be questioned. But it's a point you've made well. Were there any other points? Yes, we got one there. We'll just take a couple of questions. We have got our Art House Tales coming up. So just to give you a free advert for the next session while we're waiting. All right, there we go.
Hello, my name is Christos Ringas from Athens, Greece. And as Michael Gubbins should have put it, having 600 exhibitors now in the 30th anniversary of Europa Cinemas is the new normal. So, Michael, I have been following your insights for the past decade, and the 2 things that I can speak of is your optimism about the exhibition industry and the fact that most of the times your predictions are correct. So, having now the aggregate data about most of the European markets that indicate that the recovery from the post-COVID era has yet to come, do you feel the same optimism about the exhibition industry?
You're asking me. Well, that's good. I've got £10 on England to win the World Cup, so I'm hoping that's going to happen. But optimism is. I thought actually Laurent did it brilliantly, much better than I did. In 1984, when I was at film school, it was the lowest time in cinema. We've just got a very short memory. It was dead. There were no jobs to come out of film school into. But trends change, lines change. Do we believe in the value of culture and the long-term value of culture? Because that's what we have to build our optimism around. My optimism will be expressed in the next 2 days when you're going to see younger exhibitors, one after the other, with idea after idea and a passion about culture and the meaning of culture. And what we've heard here on this session is really clear to me, which is we have a winning argument with government, and we have a winning argument that we need to exploit, which is culture does matter. Shopping has fallen apart. We need retail isn't good enough for towns anymore. We need to find things that people can coalesce around. We need new filmmakers and new voices, not just the same people given the same old thing. And we older generation, I think, need to step down. The generation before us had the good manners to die, and we don't. We've stayed young forever. So anyway, that's my small point. Did anyone else have any points? Okay, we've got one last one at the front here, if we may. Run, run, run. Very good.
So my question goes more in direction for KAUP-HASLER. I'm French, but I'm living in Austria. I reopened a City Hall cinema in METKA in Low Austria. And 8 years ago, it was quite tough with the COVID times. But the question is, a lot of things happen in the big city, but we are outside. We are a small city. I can be open €1 million in this cinema, and without help. The question is beautiful. In France, you have a beautiful system, and you go outside in a small village to do something. The cinema go also in the small city, while the whole people are also in small city and don't move, example, to Vienna. But people like me, person like me, can go to the help on the state to make something more for this cinema. This was a whole cinema was opened in 1955. I reopened it. It's the last one from this area, and it's very difficult to have contact, to understand what we can do when you are alone. Now I'm member of only 2 years from the European Cinema Association, and very happy to be here. But it's true, the system from France is very good. Why in Austria you don't have the same system to go outside on the big city and to help outside bring the cinema to these people that cannot move to the big city? And the question is something possible also in Austria? Why not?
Please.
I'm not the cultural minister of Austria yet. No, I'm kidding. No, but I will tell this idea because I think it's not about owning any idea, but this idea of what France is doing. I will tell this to my colleague, to the Minister of Culture, because I think we should work on this thing. And on my level, we are together at the 9 regions of Austria, sitting from time to time with the Minister of Culture. I can propose this, first of all. And the second thing is, just a short note, the chief of your region, Hanna Mikl-Leitner, is going to have elections very soon. This is a good moment. This is a good moment to step a foot here and to say, do something great for the arts and for the cinema in your region. Just take the opportunity.
You should have ended that. I'm Veronica KAUP-HASLER, and I approve this message. Okay, so look, we're going to move on to our house tells. These things are really essential to me. Is that we hear from people actually doing things on the ground. But a message kind of came through in this session. I remember sitting in, I can't remember which of the very many network conferences, but Christian Mungiu was talking about, at the time when he'd won the Palme d'Or, about having to go round with a projector in a van because there was nothing, there was no way of showing a Palme d'Or winning film. And he took that van around and he showed it against walls in small Romanian towns. And then we hear from Christian about how he's gone out and they have begun to rebuild an infrastructure of a great European country, and you begin to see the importance, and he's able to win an argument with governments that were not listening and you wouldn't imagine would listen, but there's a winning argument. We heard about education from METKA, just how building those relationships with young people over a period of time that can translate into a sense of belonging, a cinema belonging to them, and building that sense that the community is not just some old people watching film, it belongs to the whole community. And we heard Christian's fantastic stories, I think, about how to take that world-class content we talked about, but it's architecture, it's culture, it's bringing all of those things together in ways that are making a genuine difference in small towns all over France. And then we heard from Veronica a very positive idea that actually this could be a winning political message, which, you know, if you're an optimist, I hadn't thought of that as being a winning message at any other time until about 5 minutes ago. But now we have that sense that maybe there has been growing understanding that that there is something about cinema and there is something about its cultural and social value that can win. And I think what we hope to hear from this conference over the next few days is how it's going to win. So thanks to the panel. And I'm going to hand you over to the great Madeleine Prost. Oh, by the way, you've got to give your headphones back. The translators are not going to follow you to the pub tonight. Make sure that you hand those in before you leave.